actually, Matt, go ahead and start it, and I'll start in a minute.
Okay, we're on. So, hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be talking today about project-based learning during remote instruction. This is a video that is part of Online Learning Ideas, which you can find at onlinelearningideas.com, where we are helping educators to make sense of online learning. And we have the guy that you want to hear from when it comes to project-based learning during remote instruction. So, I want to welcome you to the video. My name's Matt Miller. I'm the author of Ditch That Textbook and one of the co-founders of Online Learning Ideas, along with this lady to my left, to your right, Holly Clark. You want to do a quick introduction?
Yeah, so I'm Holly Clark. I am co-conspirator with this, and I wrote the Infused Classroom. But more important than us today is Kyle Wagner, who is coming to you from Hong Kong.
From the future.
Yeah, he is coming like from tomorrow, first of all, tomorrow morning, and also 8 weeks in the future from where we are. But I'm going to let Kyle introduce himself, but I want to say he's also from San Diego, where I am from, but he just doesn't reside here right now, but this is his home. So Kyle, just tell us all about yourself.
All right, yeah. So I have been sent here from the future to your world. And they have done pretty good at making me look very human, but under everything, I'm a cybernetic organism. No, but yeah, I'm over here in Hong Kong. I've been experiencing a little bit of what the coronavirus is like because like you guys mentioned, it's about 8 or 9 weeks. We've had that here. Learning has happened pretty much online, and I am really helping support teachers, I think, in making their curriculum just more engaging in an online setting. Which looks a lot different. And my main stick is project-based learning, which I have a background in. So it's just supporting teachers, educators, and schools to do that and make that shift.
Excellent. So I told people before, I invited some people from my last session over here. I hope that they came, but I told them that
Do you want to know who's here?
Sure.
Yeah.
There's Joey right there, who said, Holly talked me into following her over from Q. Let me do a couple of other check-ins real quick, because there's several of them. Here's our friend Interruption, who doesn't have a name, but has been in several of our videos.
Yeah.
We have Katie from Ottawa again, and she decided that she needed a break from Microsoft Teams. So she's going to come here and listen about project-based learning. Hello, Kelsey from Northeast Indiana, fellow Hoosier, just like me. And I'm looking, and I think that's everybody that's checked in. If you're watching this and you haven't checked in on the chat and you have an opportunity to do that, we would love to do that. And I'll kind of throw those on little by little as we go. Look, Holly, there's another one. Katie's here because you suggested it. So thank you, Katie, for coming.
I think they're all waiting for the virtual happy hour that I keep talking about, but and we're not really having one, but it would be fun. So I was telling the Q people that you taught at High Tech High, which has this amazing reputation in the United States. So that gives you the credibility. But why don't we go into some of the questions we have, which is tell me what kind of PBL is happening in Hong Kong. What are you doing with this? And what I mean by that is through remote learning. What kind of PBL is happening?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think schools are slowly transitioning to needing project-based learning. So I'd say when they first started, it wasn't necessarily like, hey, let's launch a project online. It was more like, how can we get started? Because, as some schools in the States, they had this mandate to say 24 hours, your stuff's got to be online because, we got to carry on school as usual. So I will say that it didn't transition initially to that. It was a lot of online Zoom classes. And then slowly people are realizing that, the only way we're going to keep our kids engaged and empowered, if this can be long-term, because people are saying all the way potentially till July or even fall for the next school year, that we need something different. So I've slowly seen schools start to transition more into, okay, we know projects are engaging. They've engaged students at school. So how do we do that in a digital setting? So I will say it's been a slow transition, and I see the most successful projects I'm seeing being run are ones that really can happen in an online platform that don't rely on a constant, social interaction. So I'd be happy to share some of those, but you might have another question for me.
No, I think that's the next question.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. Can you give us some examples?
Yeah, sure.
Because we're in phase 1. We're in the Zoom phase, we should all call it. Where we're just learning Zoom and we're learning Google Classroom and Microsoft Teams and taking a breath. So we're so far behind you.
Yeah, and so I would say, yeah, that's the start is getting everything, like, for example, you're getting everything in Teams, right? You're setting up your classroom in a kind of digital space, which I think is paramount first, is to establish some kind of routine. Because, initially kids, families are completely shaken up by this. You got some people who are working now from home, and you've got kids in the home, and suddenly the parents are having to be teachers as well. And so this is what I'm hearing from a lot of teachers, is that, you see mom or dad in the background because they have to, support the kids as well. So I'd say before even project-based learning happens, just establish a routine. So the same kind of routine you use in your classroom. Establish when you're going to meet in terms of class times. So for example, some classes are trying to meet and hold school as usual every single day. Like, hey, you're going to meet 3 or 4 times a day in different classes. That's not realistic, because the setup time that it's going to take, different classes are going to have different expectations, as we know in school. But even in an online setting now, if you figure you've got 5 or 6 different platforms that kids are having to tune into, where assignments are being posted and whatnot, it's just going to be kind of a headache in getting started. So I would say routines are the most important. Establish your class times. Don't do it overkill. Don't try to meet with kids 3 or 4 times a day in different classes. Have them maybe meet with their advisory in the morning, and blast out, if you're a teacher, blast out, hey, this is the kind of schedule for learning for the week of what we're looking at. Make it pretty simple. Here's what we're getting into. And then once those routines are established, then kids are feeling comfortable, then you can start launching into, hey, this is the project that we're going to be working on. Here's the curriculum and content we're going to be covered. Here's how we're going to communicate to each other. If you have Microsoft Teams, like, just stick with that and use Microsoft Teams to be like this shared platform. So I would say do that before you even think PBL. PBL is just a vehicle, as we know, to help, establish engaging and empowering opportunities for students. So I would say that is paramount first. The projects that I have seen quite successful usually is the same way. If you are starting project-based learning, you're new to it, and you haven't done it in a classroom, always start out with either a project that's been done before and that has been successful, like the whole kind of project plan laid out, or B, do something that you are really passionate about, that pretty well. And I've seen that also be successful as well.
So how does a teacher who's never done it before kind of, I don't know what happened to my sound, but
We've got an echo.
let me take out my headphones. Matt, maybe you can just ask, well, I can't hear myself, but how does the teacher who's never done it before do this?
Yeah. Do you want me to take that question? We heard you pretty well, Holly.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, like I mentioned, someone who's never, it's the same way when I started out at High Tech High, I took a project from a teacher across the street, another humanities teacher. I said, look, I'm not super comfortable with this. Do you have any projects? We're looking at archaeology and ancient civilizations. She's like, yeah, I got this whole cool project. And it's going to be this, dig where they're going to dig up artifacts from their other classmates and try to figure out a little bit about their life, and use the same kind of tools and instruments that archaeologists would use. And then they're going to have to make conclusions about them and share this in some kind of museum. And I said, cool, I will do that project. And I did it, and it was decently successful. And I think a large part because I had a lot of resources available to me. So that is a good way for you to get started with project-based learning. So that was a project that's been done before. I also know people who have done projects that they're on a topic they're familiar with. So, for example, I know someone who's doing a digital cookbook, and all their kids are interviewing their family members and trying to find out, hey, what are some of our family recipes that have been passed down from time? They're interviewing grandparents and telling a little bit about their family and their tradition, and also learning about cooking in the process. And they're going to put together this whole digital cookbook of all these recipes. So that's kind of a cool thing as well.
Yeah. I wanted to ask a quick question too. As far as project-based learning goes in a classroom, you know, so often that's where we see it happen. That's what we're so familiar with. That versus doing it in a remote setting. What are like the differences? Are there like special, you know, adjustments or adaptations that we ought to make, that we ought to know about when we go to that different environment?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that try to keep it as simple as possible, because you're not necessarily going to have that constant interaction. And I think, you know, here's a case in point. For example, I talked to a teacher who's running that project. They mentioned the digital cookbook, and she says other teachers are freaking out, because they haven't necessarily set up their classroom to run in that way, you know, and you know, B, the kids aren't experienced necessarily in being these completely independent learners, which is quite kind of required for a project. So I'd say in the classroom, there's going to be a lot of more touch points and contact points to be able to check in with students. I think in an online space, you've got to kind of keep it as simple as possible. So have a couple places where kids can interact, maybe work in part, have them working independently to start out on a project. Because if that culture hasn't been established necessarily in the classroom, it's very hard to now just start that in this digital space, because, you know, kids are going to have to plan their own schedules. They're going to have to work out who's going to be responsible for what part of the project, and you know, where to access resources and materials and those kind of things. Some people aren't going to have internet access, you know, so that's going to be hard to coordinate. So I would say first, if you've established the culture in your classroom, transfer it into a digital setting where, you know, kids are able to collaborate in some kind of workspace, whether using Teams or whether using Trello or other project management systems. If you haven't established that in the classroom, really scaffold it quite heavily. If you're a teacher, help them through each stage. Say, here's each stage of the project that we're going to be working on, so they can feel comfortable.
So I hope that this is not echoing, but I saw a really good question, and we didn't do this. We didn't kind of define project-based learning, and someone asked, what's the difference between blended learning and project-based learning?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, you know, blended learning is just an opportunity to have, you know, digital resources available, you know, as well as if you're in the actual classroom, you have those resources available. So I see blended learning as just a way of accessing content regardless of where you are. So I think in a really well-run project, it's blended, you know, it's blended type of learning. So I think blended learning is this gigantic umbrella that you can fit all different types of learning under. Project-based learning is one of those things. So in a really well-run project, it's going to be blended, where there's going to be part of the content that you're going to need that's going to be delivered online. So for example, you know, if you're running a Model United Nations project and kids are having to represent different countries, well, in a blended system, you would have, hey, kids are going to have to do some of that research on their own, and there's going to be some tutorials about how to do the research and how to organize their information. That's blended, right? And then during class time, they're going to also have an opportunity to share and discuss with each other. Here's what I found. What did you find? Let's get our information, collaborate, and get that synthesized so that we can start to develop our position as our country, how we feel about this, and how we're going to solve this issue. So I don't know if that answered the question, but blended is a big umbrella. Project-based learning fits under that.
So,
I think that nailed it.
I'm having sound problems. Can you guys hear them?
Yeah, Kyle, can you turn your volume down? It's an echo coming from your speakers.
Oh, is it really? Okay. Is that better?
We'll find out. Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's
that.
look at project-based learning for the people who don't know. So you referenced model nations. So kids are getting together. They're doing research around a nation. They're maybe, and I don't know what this looks like, and you can talk about this more, but walk someone through what a project-based learning, what it looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a project-based learning, you know, the simple definition is it's a deep investigation that requires the acquisition of a lot of content and skills to answer a driving question. I mean, that's like a, you know, sentence or two definition. But if I walk you through it, you know, it usually starts with a launch, and that is something that gets kids engaged into what problem are they going to solve. I mean, in general, when we say problem-based or project-based, we're talking about the same things. Lots of projects are really solving or addressing a problem or a major issue. So for example, with this, the issue is obviously with the spread of coronavirus, you know, the big driving question could be, as representatives of different governments, how do we help, you know, better inform the public and prevent the spread of the coronavirus? And so within that actual driving question, there are some touch points that kids are going to need. For example, they're representing different governments. So, you know, then it launches them into, well, how are we going to address and solve this? So the driving question is what starts it. There's a launch with usually what the problem is. Kids then go in through this deep investigation, which the teacher would then scaffold experiences to allow them to be able to answer that driving question. And the culminating activity for that project, or the potential final outcome, is the way that students are answering that. And if you're new to project-based learning, oftentimes it's best to have that kind of worked out. So in this case, they're going to come together in a conference, a digital virtual conference where they're going to represent different countries, and with all their research, and come to a resolution as to how we might solve this. So I don't know if that is a question, but hopefully that gave you some pieces of what you do.
I thought it was quite profound.
It's good, yeah.
And I think that as we get into the stage 2 and stage 3 of this online learning in the US anyway, that's going to have to become a part of our repertoire. And I wanted to ask you, these global goals, so there are what, 12, 9? I can't remember what they are, but they can be looked up. Do you think that's a good starting place for a teacher, maybe?
You mean the sustainable development goals?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are starting with those. I would say the caveat to that is sustainable development goals are a good start, but keep it as concrete as possible. You know, for example, these big goals, like for example, you know, ending all poverty by a certain, you know, year. I don't know what the year is. That's gigantic. That's huge. And to start project-based learning, you might start with your own community and looking at, hey, the sustainable development goal has to do big time around poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's within our own community where that exists, let's start doing some community mapping and look at how can we provide more equitable opportunities for kids aged, I don't know, 10 to 17. Well, then that's going to house something that kids are going to be able to have more actionable, whether it's starting these after school programs, or they're providing these resources, virtual resources to students to give them more equity to learning, whatever that is. That their outcomes are going to be a lot deeper and more significant. So global goals are huge umbrella, but I say keep it pretty concrete to your community, at least to start.
It's so funny because I was at High Tech High for their exhibition night or whatever, and that's the one I filmed of a kid who was doing the poverty for San Diego. That was brilliant.
What did he do? What was his project?
It was like, how were they going to solve the poverty problem, or no, homelessness actually in San Diego? And they had all of these, they had like a multi-tier approach to, you know, I can't remember exactly what it was, but he was so articulate about explaining it. And I actually filmed him, so I should probably put that out on the Twitters or whatever. We want to go ahead, Matt.
Oh yeah, I had a comment. This is something Kelsey mentioned earlier. Kyle, wanted to see what you thought about this. She says, just a thought, incorporate collaboration through feedback protocols throughout the project to start, rather than asking students to complete a project in partners or small groups. What do you think, Kyle?
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely a very good piece of advice. Yeah, the collaboration that students are going to have is a lot of times going to happen through that feedback. So if, for example, you know, someone is answering that question of poverty and they had proposed a particular solution, and maybe it was like, hey, we're going to provide some entrepreneurship skills. We're going to teach them, you know, this small example of what they can do. And then another student might be able to give them feedback and be able to say, okay, you know, well, we tried that here, and I'm actually doing something quite similar as well. You know, teaching these handy skills, and maybe we can combine, or so I think feedback is a good way of getting kids to collaborate. It's definitely more authentic that way. You know, how might you answer this question? And then who else in the class has a similar kind of idea, and then partnering that way, the same way you you were doing a project. And I'd say another caveat to that is, where do you as a student not have the expertise, and where might someone else in the class be able to support you? So like if you're making a video and you've never made a video before, this kid, in your class every day is shooting skating videos, and has put this whole thing together on YouTube. Well, borrow that expertise and you can do a different part of that. So
yeah. I know my first foray into problem-based learning, I just asked the kids a problem. This wasn't very sophisticated, but it was just the first thing I came up with. We were learning about cave paintings, and I said, how do we know? And I need you to go out and find out and give me a report. How do we know that these are, if they're like a dinner menu or prehistoric art? And I want you to figure it out. And I pretty much just like kind of walked away and let them do it. And I was amazed at what they were able to produce. But that was a very rudimentary, but for some people, that's where they'll be at first. Just a problem about something that you're learning about.
Yeah.
Okay, so we want to keep this short, but I want to give you an opportunity to just maybe give like some advice to teachers who are starting this. Where could, like, you have a bunch of resources, where could they go to get resources from you? If you were one-to-one giving them advice, what would you give?
Yeah, so I would say that the number one thing I would say, like I mentioned, is find enough case studies or examples of projects that have been successful, because the only way you're going to, I hear a dog in the background.
Bill agrees with you, apparently.
the dog saying, yes, that's right. The way you're going to get better project-based learning is just to do it. So just dive in. And the places I would say to go are a couple. PBL Works puts out a lot of great stuff to get people started. PBLworks.org, I think it is. And once you sign up there with your email, they'll give you tons of good projects tailored to your particular subject or your grade level. Also, High Tech High has a lot of good sample projects. And then Expeditionary Learning is wonderful. Expeditionary Learning, I think it's .org or .com. Has a lot of good project examples as well. So I would say start out with a project that's been done before. So look to those resources. If you want a community for support, I just realized that a lot of people new to project-based learning, myself included, it's very helpful to have support. So if you're looking for a professional learning community, I'm starting some professional learning communities that will help you build your project, get support in terms of the challenges that you're facing, and be able to help, promote, empower, and engage your students. So that's something that I'm trying to put out to help people out. Those are PLCs of just 10 people, and you'll have ideas from across all different schools and all different climates.
So interestingly enough, Kyle, you're very familiar with Deeper Learning Conference because it happens at High Tech High, and it got canceled this year. So they've actually moved it over to EdSpace, which you've heard about and Matt's heard about. And I was just talking about it at Q. So I've been going on to EdSpace recently, and I've actually become very, it's actually turning into something really cool where people are reflecting on their experiences of COVID, and and it's this place where it's not public facing, and you can really have conversations with teachers. But anyway, Deeper Learning Conference is going over there. So the other day I'm on there watching videos, and there's Ruben Quintadora, the SAMR guy, on there because he was going to be presenting at Deeper Learning, talking about these things. And I was like, wait, what? And so I was like Netflix watching EdSpace the other day. It's actually turned out to be quite interesting over there.
That's great. Yeah, EdSpace is excellent, and you know a lot more about EdSpace now too because you've been in there. But yeah, I'm gonna make a note to check that out as well.
Actually, Matt, it's goedspace.com. EdSpace Live is just like the website that tells you about it. But if you want to jump in and go look at it, and it's got just enough teachers right now where it's not overwhelming, which I like.
Cool. Very good. All right, wonderful. Can I check? I'm going to check real quick in the comments and see what we've got. Okay, Wendy has a question real quick. She says, what apps or programs do you suggest to incorporate PBL? Is there any sort of tool that makes it easier or improves the process?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are on Teams right now. I think if you have a platform that you're using, like Microsoft Teams, that helps with the project process, because you have different channels for your different project groups, and everything's managed in that interface. Google Classroom is obviously great as well, because that's where you can post all the various assignments, the resources for students as well. I've seen a lot of teachers who have just put things together through a nice hyperlinked document, or in an actual Google slide deck, where it kind of runs them through the process of the driving question, to here are some resources, to here's the process of what you're going to do. So I'd say, just to keep it simple, use those kind of platforms that you're already familiar with.
Boom, but the thing you just put up, that was awesome. Because you can't wait to start something. You have to just go. And that's what happened when I got my first one-to-one in the year 2000. There was no blogs. There was no Twitter. I had to just learn with the students, and it's what made it perfect.
Yep.
So great information, Kyle. We really appreciate you taking the time and coming to us all the way from the future.
Yeah. Sure. Happy to support.
Yeah. So real quick, one more time, if folks want to find you or get connected with you, or, see any of the resources that you have available, where's the best place for that?
So a couple places for that. One, I think the best place is my email, Kyle Wagner @transformschool.com. And the second best place to connect with me is via Twitter. That's at KWAGSSD3. Apologize for the handle. It's not the best handle. KWAGSSD3. And then the final place is via my website, which is transformschool.com. www.transformschool.com.
And you have a book, The Power of Simple.
That's true. So yeah, I do have a book out there. If you want to get that, it's called The Power of Simple, and just about some shifts you can make to help make learning more authentic for students.
Okay, well, thank you. And I'm apparently messing up on my internet. So anyway, thank you. And thanks, everyone. And we'll see you next week when we talk about something else.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much. See y'all.
Thank you, guys.